As the population of Northwest Arkansas has risen dramatically, the region has seen a greater strain on its criminal justice system. Local sheriffs say they need more space to hold inmates in county jails if they are to do their job correctly. Justice reform advocates say counties and the state need to do a better job at looking at alternatives to jailing those suspects of crimes and more alternative sentencing options for those convicted. Some jail expansions have progressed in recent years, though larger expansion projects requiring increased sales taxes have failed to garner voter support. And a plan for a new state prison that would be the state's largest could see impacts ripple through the county jail system, but it too has faced public pushback and numerous questions. So what are the realities surrounding local county jails and the prison system in Arkansas? What are the solutions some are promoting? And what are the feared consequences if nothing changes? This is Unpacking the Issue. Before we start, it's worth noting that the issue is so complex we think it needs more than one episode to do it justice. This time around, we'll be going over the Northwest Arkansas County Jail crowding issue, and we'll follow up in our next episode looking at the Franklin County prison proposal and some of the options for alternative sentencing and justice reform that are being tried or suggested. The current Benton and Washington County jails have been in operation for decades, and local officials say that they weren't made for the region's current population in mind. Construction on the Benton County facility began in 1997, and it opened in sections in 1998 and 1999. It was originally built with around 550 to 560 beds, and has been upgraded and expanded a few times throughout the years. That includes an addition of a pod outside the main facility for women with about 120 beds, and an administrative add-on for classrooms and training and other various functions. In total, the expansion has brought the facility up to 669 beds.
So when the original jail was built, around 550, 560, through the years the expansions added 669 beds. We currently exceed that number daily. Right now I think we're running somewhere between 680 to 700 people in the facility. There's been times where we've approached and bumped 800. So you can do the math there real quick. If there's only 669 beds, obvious question, where are these people sleeping?
The Washington County Detention Center was built in the early 2000s, and it went into use in March of 2005. It was built with a planned occupancy rate of 710 inmates.
We had reduced our population because we knew it would be a challenge coming to a new jail. We reduced our population in the old jail down to 200 detainees. So when we moved, we brought 200 with us. We'd released everybody we could release at the time so that we could just learn the operations of this new place.
In the years since the jails were built, Benton and Washington counties have seen their population grow tremendously, outpacing census projections. For example, in 1991, the U.S. Census Bureau projected that Benton County would have a population of 178,072 residents in 2020. But when the 2020 census was conducted, it found that the actual population of the county was 284,333, 60% more than what was expected. According to the University of Arkansas Center for Business and Economics Research report in 2003, the projected population for Washington County in 2025 was around 190,000 to 210,000. But the census count in 2020 found that there was already 245,871 residents in the county, exceeding the projections for 5 years later by more than 35,000 people. With all that growth, sheriffs and county judges in both counties say that jail facilities need to expand to keep up.
And things that we're doing. Well, one of the problems we have it based on our population, we should have a much larger facility than we have today. We've paid experts to study and look at trends nationwide based on our demographics and our population and recommendations on what size of jail should we have for our population. We have 669 beds. With our population today, they projected just felony beds, we should have somewhere around 1,200. So what that means, obviously we can't keep 1,200 people. Our numbers are staying about the same. I get asked about this. People want to allude to the fact that crime hasn't gone up. In fact, it really has. The real number you should look at are numbers coming out of the prosecutor's office based on the type of cases they have. The reason you can't look at jail numbers purely now we can't put any more people in that space than what we do now. So what that means, people who normally would have been in our jail, say 10 years ago, they get released on a no bond or a very low bond, or just to get the numbers down so that we can hold the more serious ones that we don't want out in our community. People for murder, rape, those type of things.
So the history is interesting because Andy Lee, a sheriff of a few decades ago, really was the champion for getting that jail built that we had now. And he was criticized at the time for overbuilding. You know, there was some concern that he had maybe reached too far in the facility he had built. And it turns out he knew something. He knew that we were growing. And if you look back, and I'm glancing at some of my data over here on the left, back in the year, in the mid-90s, when Northwest Arkansas Regional Planning was doing some population projections, they had projected that in 2020, our census would have Benton County at 178,000 people. And at the time, that was considered rapid, crazy growth. I mean, that was still a big growth curve. Well, it turns out our census was 284,000, and now we're up to about 330,000 plus in Benton County. And so the fact is, when that jail was built at the time, it was thought to be even over capacity. It's going to be a long time, years and years and years before that jail filled up. And it turned out it wasn't that long at all.
We've got 710 beds there. And the county jails, by just their operation, based on the people they have to house, typically about 80% of max is your max operating capacity. So we have 710 beds. So we should be holding 580 to 600 as our maximum operating capacity. And that's for the fact that we have so many different classifications of detainees. Well, to start with, we house males and females. You know, the prisons, a little different in that they only house males, or another unit houses females. So we have males and females, and then within that group, we have the violent offenders that have to be separated, and then we have people that have to be administratively segregated based upon their charges, child abusers, sexual assault, detainees, people that those kind of charges have to be separated from general population just for their own safety. And then we have committed and non-committed, and or what we call our trustees, which are the ones that help do the cleaning and of the jail and the painting and some of the maintenance and the general labor. So all those people have to be separated. So that classification, the way we have to sort those people out, causes us to really sometimes struggle whenever we're over that operational capacity. So.
It was put into service with a planned occupancy rate of about 710 individuals. I think for the past decade, we've been running well over those numbers. What that results in is either 100 to 120 individuals sleeping on the floor at any given time. COVID really exacerbated this whole thing, and I want the viewers and listeners to understand too, while COVID is in the rearview mirror of some of our individual lives, the jail is still operating underneath those parameters and those guidelines. So quarantining now is a huge issue. So you take a facility that was designed for 710 individuals 20 years later, and how technology and society's advanced, it really only has an occupancy of about 580 due to the quarantining issues. Some of that makes sense. People will understand that you segregate men and women, and then also certain offenses from others. But then, of course, the layer of the onion that got a lot more complicated was COVID, and having to isolate and quarantine those individuals from others. You can understand the jail is a congregate facility that was never designed for a global pandemic, and so it's really put a lot of stress on a facility that was already stressed.
A Benton County Criminal Justice Committee recommended in 2022 that $250 million be spent on a jail expansion and a courts complex. The county sought voter approval for a $241 million project to expand the jail and build a new criminal justice complex that November, but voters rejected that request 63% to 37%. It would have been paid for with a temporary sales tax increase, as well as a permanent sales tax increase to pay for operations. Sarah Moore of the Arkansas Justice Reform Coalition said at the time that the best practice recommended by the U.S. Department of Justice is to assess the entire criminal justice system and to come up with solutions and recommendations for better efficiency and safety for the community. She said a consultant hired by the committee recommended a full array of solutions be researched before the committee's recommendation to expand the jail. The taxpayer deserves proper diligence and a full vetting of all the possible solutions, and this has not occurred in Benton County, she said at the time. In 2024, the Benton County Quorum Court approved spending $2.7 million in the yearly budget to build an addition that wouldn't result in more beds, but would upgrade parts of the facility, especially those related to medical needs.
So the most recent expansion we did was to address our medical needs and our abilities to deliver services to the inmates that are there. When the jail was originally designed, mental health and healthcare in general were not on the map of thoughts when facilities were designed at that era of time. But we've evolved now. Mental health is a great big issue. A lot of people would say anyone that's in jail has probably got a mental type issues they're dealing with, and that'd be hard to argue that that's not true. But being able to provide that, but being able to provide for health needs within a facility. In our society today, it's mandated that we give adequate care. What we had before was designed in the 90s. It was a very small room with, I believe, 2 beds and very overcrowded. It was designed, jail was 450 then. I mean, I told you a while ago, we've hit numbers of almost 800. So it was not designed for that, as well as a lot of the other things within the facility, such as the kitchen, the laundry room, property where we keep the inmates' clothing when they come out. All that's inadequate today. But so our expansion, we wanted to address the health side of it. So we did an expansion off our current booking area with state-of-the-art exam rooms, a dental room, but areas for our contract medical company to have offices there and a small pharmaceutical area. So we've addressed that. It's open now and running. We still have a few things to get that going up to 100%. One of the other things I mentioned was the property room. We did an expansion on that. And what I mean by that, think of the dry cleaners. You know, when you see all the things on the conveyor belt, each inmate has their own bag. The one we had before was built in the 90s and been very robust. We've had to fix it a few times, but it wasn't big enough. So we were trying to stuff literally double the amount of stuff. So we expanded that with this project, and we expanded what they call a sally port, which is the entrance when a police officer brings a person to the facility where they drive in and the door's shut. We had a very small area, and oftentimes we'd end up with people having to park in the parking lot and walk the inmate. For security reasons, it's better for them to be inside that locked facility. So we expanded that, and that was part of our project. To make us more efficient, some of the things that we have inside the jail were moved to this new area right outside the sally port. One of them being the breathalyzer. When someone has someone who's been suspected of driving under the influence, we can do this in a more secure area. We had before, we have a body scanner, much like what you would see at an airport, to make sure someone's not smuggling something inside their body, to make sure they haven't swallowed something dangerous. So it alerts us whether we need to take this person to the hospital before we admit them into it. So that's all in the pre-booking area now. Before you had to come in, you just have to see, we booked you in, and then you went into booking and then into another room. So we're stopping all this before it ever gets into the facility.
Meanwhile, in 2022, Washington County voters also rejected a jail expansion plan, as well as a proposal to expand the Juvenile Justice Center. The proposal called for issuing up to $113.5 million in bonds to expand the jail and up to $28.5 million for the Juvenile Justice Center. They would have been paid for by a 0.25% sales tax that would have expired when the bonds were paid off. The jail bonds failed 59% to 41%. The juvenile court bond failed 54% to 46%.
59% of the voters in Washington County voted against that. And in my work with Arkansas Justice Reform Coalition, we went out in the county to every JP district in the county, and we had public meetings about that. We asked people how they wanted their ARPA money spent, what they wanted to do to see happen as with regard to the jail. And we collected signatures of people who were against the jail expansion, over a couple of thousand. We presented those to the quorum court. The people that we talked to from going out in the county, they want us to look at alternatives to incarceration. They realize how costly incarceration can be and how it harms people and families. And they knew about the study. They wanted us to implement those things that we could be doing to address the cause of that over incarceration. And then when so the quorum court put it on the ballot, and they said, let the people decide. Well, the people decided. They defeated it soundly. And then a couple of weeks later, the quorum court then came back and said, well, the people voted against the tax. They didn't vote against the jail expansion. Well, that's not what I heard when I was out in the county. I heard that they were voting against the jail expansion.
1 month after the jail expansion failed at the ballot box, the Washington County Quorum Court voted 11-4 to spend $18.8 million in federal American Rescue Plan Act money for a jail expansion project county officials said would have made the facilities better able to handle detainees who tested positive for COVID. Construction on that project is expected to be completed in fall of 2026, according to Sheriff Jay Cantrell.
Right now it's just one area. People that come into jail sit next to somebody that's getting released from jail. We learned during COVID that we needed some separation, not just with COVID, but with other communicable diseases that might travel around through the jail. And so we're going to separate our intake and release. We're going to add some beds to our medical suite. So we've got currently 4 beds in our medical suite, and we'll double that to 8 beds. Get a dedicated outdoor exercise area for those people in the medical suite, so that we don't have to commingle them. People that are in the medical don't have to commingle them with other detainees. It'll give more room for the health provider to provide services there. And we're going to build a warehouse, because we learned during COVID that not only could we not find toilet paper for our individual homes, we had trouble sourcing different supplies we needed every day at the jail: gloves, toilet paper, just things that we use every day. And we have trouble getting those sourced. We learned that we can't expect a delivery every 2 days from our supplier, that we need to be able to take larger loads. So we're building a warehouse to be able to take bigger deliveries of things that we use regularly in our jail. So we've built in a warehouse with some warehouse storage in it, so we can store mattresses and uniforms and toilet paper and soap and all the things that we have to use daily. And then we're building some housing units. When we built our jail in 2005, or moved in it, we built it earlier, but we designed it as efficiently as possible. We had large housing units that held 32 people. Some held 24, but a lot of them are barrack style. And we learned with COVID that we might only have 10 or 12 people that were testing positive, but we had to keep those people isolated and to protect the rest of the population. And so we would maybe have 12 people in a 24-bed cell, and those beds just sat empty, where we would have 50 or 60 over here in a 32-bed cell, because we had to have some place to put them. So we designed a housing, kind of a minimum security housing, but with smaller housing units that are 8, 10, and 12-bed housing segments, and to help us to better isolate people that did test positive, or people that were exposed to COVID. And of course, that was the whole crux of the project, was to help mitigate COVID within the detention facility, because obviously we're a confined facility, close proximity, and we know that just from our past experiences, that the jail population is not the healthiest population. People that come into jail are typically not the healthiest segment of our population. So we know that they come in maybe compromised with their immune system or different things. So having those smaller cell blocks is going to help us. We originally thought we would get a couple hundred beds, but this project took longer to get off the ground than we thought, and we've since learned that the cost of goods and materials have gone up. So we're hopeful to get about 88 beds in a minimum security building. in this project. So, but anyway, that will be a tremendous help to us to have a little relief to get people into these smaller housing units and give us more room to operate.
The Arkansas Justice Reform Coalition filed a lawsuit in 2024 seeking to block the use of federal COVID relief funds for the Washington County project. But that lawsuit was dismissed in March of 2025 after a judge found that the group had no standing and pursued the claims made in the lawsuit.
It's a terrible waste of money. It's illegal. The United States Treasury guidelines for the American Rescue Plan Act money specifically says that cannot be used. Let me find out if I can find that quote just a minute. Okay. The following expenditures are generally not allowable: construction of new correctional facilities as a response to the increase in the rate of crime, construction of new congregate facilities to decrease the spread of COVID-19 in the facility. So there's a possibility that the U.S. Treasury at some point could come back and say, hey, Washington County, you spent this money on the jail expansion and on these COVID mitigation facilities that was against the rules. So now we want that money back. That could happen. No one's talking about that, but it could happen. And if it did, that would be really hard for Washington County to come up with $20 million to pay that back.
Washington County Judge Patrick Deakins disagrees, arguing the current expansion does follow federal rules.
What I need people to understand, and what gets criticized and I think misinformed a lot, that's not an expansion of the number of souls that we can keep in that facility. It's an expansion of the services that we want to give. ARPA was very specific in its guidelines about what you could use that for. You know, the sheer expansion of an carceral facility was not intended for that money, nor do we think it was intended for that money. We're not using for that. What we're doing right now is expanding services that were very much taxed and overwhelmed during the pandemic and what we're continuing to see. Our medical unit was severely underutilized. It was undersized is what I'll say. We're more going to double that. The other area is the booking area. That's where a lot of people in this new environment are interacting. You know, people are coming in and out of the facility, and so in those congregate settings are our riskiest settings when you're looking at something like COVID. We're now going to have more space. We're going to have more ability to process those individuals faster. You'll see a lot of people that will get arrested and will sit in booking for hours, just waiting to be processed in or out of that facility. That's dangerous for the detainees, it's dangerous for the officers, and so we're trying to limit all that, make that process much, much more efficient. The other thing is we're going to put in some more quarantining areas. So these aren't beds that will be used for housing general population, but they're beds that if we have to quarantine these people, these individuals, we can do that in a more efficient manner.
The one word heard over and over again when trying to nail down the source of jail overcrowding seen in Benton and Washington counties is population. As pointed out earlier, when their respective jails were built, the two counties' population projections for the next 2 decades were far below the population growth that has actually been seen in the area. District Court Judge Chris Griffin agrees population is clearly an issue, but it isn't the only factor contributing to jail overcrowding, he said. He pointed to state-level issues, such as people being sentenced to the Arkansas Department of Corrections, but the ADC not having room for them, which means they have to be held in county facilities until the state prison spots open up. According to county judges and sheriffs, the state only pays $40 per day for its inmates, while it actually costs more like $80 per day to house them in local jails, which compounds funding issues for the counties. Judge Griffin also mentioned what was coined truth in sentencing laws, passed in 2023, that extended the amount of time that had to be served in prison on certain charges and changed the way time reductions applied for others in prison. There are also logistical issues to consider, he said, such as requirements for separation of inmates based on charges, gender, and a wide variety of other considerations. To put it simply, Griffin said, "I think sometimes the public drastically oversimplifies how the jails work." Washington County Jay Cantrell agrees state issues are having an impact.
Obviously, the jails are primarily designed for pretrial people waiting to go to court, and then once they go to court and get sentenced to prison, then we hold them until the prison can get a bed open. And the prisons are full, they're backlogged, so on a given day we'll have 150 to 170 people waiting to go to prison. that are just waiting there for a bed to open up, and it's been taking 5 to 6 months for them to get a bed open and allow us to bring some of those people down. So the state does reimburse us at about $40 a day. It costs us just a little over $80 a day to house somebody. So the state does pick up $40 of that cost, but it's still, it's just a significant drain on our county resources. That, and add to the fact that we're overcrowded, and I've got this morning I had 150 people sleeping without a bed, sleeping on the floor. On the floor means that we give them double mattresses, but they don't have a bunk assigned to them. So there's about 150. So if I got rid of the 150 state people, if they had a place to put them, then I might not have anybody on the floor, or just very few.
Justice reform advocates argue that there are other issues at play.
One of the biggest reasons for the overcrowding in the jail is that we have, out of 750 people, about 425 of those people a couple of days ago were there pre-trial, which means they've been arrested and are charged, but they haven't been found guilty. And once the judicial officer sets their bond, their bail, if they can pay that, they can get out of jail pending their trial and go on about their lives. If they can't, if they're too poor to buy their freedom, they sit in jail for months. And that has a great deal to do with the overcrowding. People can sit in jail on low-level nonviolent offenses on bonds around $5,000 or $10,000 for months. Maybe it's not unusual for them to be there 3 months, and before they get out. And so that increases the numbers at the jail. And the other thing, we rent jail beds to the federal government, to the Bureau of Prisons and the U.S. Marshal's Office and ICE, and we shouldn't be doing that.
Whereas the state only pays $40 a day for inmates held in the Washington County Jail, the federal government pays around $80, about what it costs to house them, according to the county sheriff and the county judge.
I want people to understand those federal inmates are part of our community. They were more than likely arrested here in these jurisdictions on federal charges, and so we also know that Fayetteville hosts the federal courts here, some of the federal courts, and so it's a logistical issue, I think, in the promotion and the preservation of law enforcement in our efforts. We want to be able to work with our federal partners. Now, I've been critical of that myself. If you don't have the bed space, how do we sell them? And I think that's the other problem is last year in 2024, Washington County, the advantage to our budget by holding federal inmates was $2.2 million. Now, if we want to get rid of that, and that's an open debate, which I'm willing to have that discussion, we all have to be prepared to consume that $2.2 million budget hole that will be created by no longer holding those individuals.
A cycle of people failing to appear for court dates is also cited by officials as playing a role in jail overcrowding.
And then another factor is, I think that we see that probably the biggest crimes that come in are failure to appear. People that get a charge, are assigned a court date, either out on bond or released on their own recognizance, and then they don't come to court. And then failure to appear if it's a felony charge, then that's another Class C felony just for not coming to court. So in addition to their original charge, now they've got another Class C felony, failure to appear. The court has set aside a day and a time for them to come to court to start taking care of this matter, and then those people don't show up, and it just causes the court to end up in a backlog situation. So I think the failure to appear is probably the second biggest thing behind growth, is people just not going to court and taking care of that obligation.
Judge Chris Griffin agrees a pattern of failure to appear charges is having an impact. He said he once saw someone who had 21 failure to appear charges over a 7 to 8 year span. When these people eventually do get brought into court with so many failures to appear charges, a judge is likely to set a high bond, he said. The number one factor judges must consider at a bond hearing, Griffin said, is has this person gone to court in the past? If not, then the judge is more likely to set a high bond to keep them from missing court yet again. It's tragic that I have people who spend more time on the failures to appear than they would have on the underlying charge, the judge said. Washington County Justice of the Peace and Arkansas Justice Reform Coalition co-founder Beth Koger agrees failure to appear charges are having an impact, but she believes those people usually have an understandable reason for missing court dates, and that other factors such as understaffing public defender offices and not embracing justice reform are also to blame.
Very few people actually abscond, actually leave the area and can't be found. That does happen, but it's very, very seldom. Most people are here in the county and they have various reasons for not showing up to court. I go to bond hearings, 8.1 hearings, and you hear all kinds of reasons why they don't show up for court. Like the common cause is they were afraid that if they missed work, they'd lose their job. They didn't have child care, they didn't have transportation. But my point is on that they're not going to abscond, they're going to be around, but yet they get picked up on failure to appear charges and get a very high bond, and they're going to be sitting there. That's another reason for the jail overcrowding. Another reason I think is because we need more public defenders in Washington County. Our public defenders are overworked, understaffed, underpaid. If we had, say, 3 more public defenders to help move cases through, that would be a huge advantage. Another reason that we're so overcrowded is we're doing, as far as our policymakers, we're doing the same thing that we were doing 40, 50 years ago here in Washington County. I mean, I wasn't here then, but we're just building more jail beds and locking up more people, but we're not addressing the root causes of why we have so many people in our jail. So the Washington County Quorum Court commissioned a study in 2020 from the National Center of State Courts. In that study, they came and analyzed the entire justice system in Washington County. They gave us a blueprint of what we need to do, but we haven't done those things. For instance, have a robust pretrial services program. Getting back to the pretrial people that I mentioned, if we had a real pretrial services program, we could clear out the jail overcrowding in a matter of weeks, or at least a month.
Most everyone agrees the jail overcrowding issue is having an impact across the justice system and within the community at large. Within the justice system, judges, prosecutors, and sheriffs say one of the biggest effects is felt in misdemeanor justice.
You flip back 10 years ago, you had a mix of different levels of people who were charged with very serious felonies to lower type felonies, first-time drug user, those type of things. But we also had misdemeanors. Fast forward to today, we hold very few misdemeanors, and the reason for that is outlined by the Constitution and what the duties of a sheriff are. So we are mandated by Constitution to hold felons. We are not mandated to hold misdemeanors. Misdemeanors would be your lower level crimes like a low level theft or a DWI, a battery, things of that nature. So today we might hold 20 misdemeanors that we have to, that are mandated for an appearance before a judge. I say all that to get into the bigger picture of other things that are going on. Misdemeanor justice, which is in a district court level, versus felonies that are in circuit court. Normally those are where we can correct behaviors of people early on that have committed a low-level crime and deter their behavior so that they're not a future felon on a more serious charge. Well, that system is broken today. It's broken in Benton County, it's broken in Washington County, it's broken in many places within the state that are experiencing a lot of the same things we are with growth of our state in particular areas.
District Judge Griffin said he has seen the impact of misdemeanor justice as well. There are numerous people who get in trouble on a misdemeanor charge and don't spend any time in jail initially, and then repeatedly fail to show up to court, he said. That sometimes results in a situation where people who have missed court with little consequence on misdemeanor charges try to do the same when they get a felony charge leveled against them, only to find that there are more severe consequences for a felony failure to appear.
And a lot of people, when they think of district court cases, they think of traffic offenses, minor, low-level type of charges. But the Arkansas Code covers a lot more than just traffic offenses in district court. Usually first time, relatively low injury domestic cases are handled in district court. First time and usually the second or third DWI offense, that's handled in district court as well, which means it becomes very incumbent upon us to close cases in district court, because those examples of serious cases actually can become more of a compound charge once they pick up a second offense. A good example of that is a domestic battery offense usually goes up to a higher level offense, and usually a felony level offense, if there's a previous conviction and the state's able to prove the new conviction. One of the challenges that we've discovered is without teeth in the system to ensure that defendants who fail to appear for court are held accountable for failing to appear. Those type of cases that affect directly our ability to prosecute felony cases in circuit court go on and go on and go on. A good example of this is one of our city court prosecutors who I talked to several months back, and I just out of curiosity while I had him on the phone asked him what he was working on. And he said, I'm working on a 19 count district court case. The first underlying count, or there was 3 first underlying counts, the rest of the counts on this offer are all failure to appears. He was like, I'm drafting this up to be ready for court. I know deep down in my heart with that many FTAs, the guy is going to FTA again. And the victims in my underlying case are going to have to wait out again. And I'm going to have to wait until he gets picked up, until he gets cited back into court, because we can't hold him and to hold him in the Benton County Jail to hold him accountable for the 19 previous FTAs.
Griffin and Sexton both brought up concerns about what happens to the victims in the underlying cases after all these failures to appear.
Cases don't age like fine wine. They usually get worse, or turn to turn the rest of the phrase, they turn into vinegar. They don't turn into wine. You end up losing contact with your victim. You end up having changes in personnel with your police department. That means that you will not be successful in hunting down a former officer who's retired or left the state, or who's left without forwarding information. The older the case gets, the higher chances are that we will not get a successful prosecution on those cases. And the only thing left is to prosecute the failure to appears.
District Court Judge Taylor Samples in Springdale said the limited jail space in the region has resulted in Springdale District Court relying heavily on the use of ankle bracelets. Some misdemeanors require a mandatory minimum sentence, and in those instances, the court often has the person convicted serve their time on an ankle bracelet, he said. The judge said he thinks ankle bracelets are a good option because they help judges avoid sending people to already crowded jails, and they also help those convicted of certain misdemeanors to keep their job and stay with their families. Washington County Patrick Deakins said he's concerned about the number of people going in and out of jail repeatedly and not getting the resources they need to improve their lives so that they can stay out of jail going forward.
So what you see now is when we're putting together data for the county that concerns me is you will see an individual, this is not an uncommon story, that's been in and out of our detention center facility down there 30 plus times. So what that tells me is what we're doing is not working. The other thing I need people to understand is 95% of those individuals that walk in the door to that jail facility, they get returned right back to your community in a matter of days or hours. Have we done anything to correct that issue? Have we done anything to help that individual get to resources? And once again, I'm not talking about the hardened criminal. I'm talking about the person who's experienced drug abuse, issues or mental health issues. Those people need some sort of resource. And I think it's time that we be honest about this. And I think a lot of people, they can dismiss this whole issue and say, well, that's the offender. And I'll admit, maybe one day in my life, I thought if you violated the law, that's your issue and we're done with it. I don't care what happens to you after you go to the penitentiary. But I think that's a very short-sighted viewpoint of our community. The other major issue I see in this is the community. When we arrest them, they're not my neighborhood's problem anymore. They're the sheriff's department's problem. When the sheriff gets them in his facility, and they get convicted of a crime and are waiting for the state penitentiary, they're the state's problem. And then when they're in the state, they're ready for those people to go home, and they're our problem again. Nobody's taking ownership of this segment of our community that needs help. And so what I'm telling people is too, even if you have that hardcore justice mentality, you can see that in a person who's been in and out of our facility 30 plus times and has consumed all those public resources is not getting better. They're coming back over and over and over again. And I think it's high time we take responsibility for those individuals in our community.
No matter who you ask, the general belief is that what the region is doing right now in terms of criminal justice and jailing isn't working. But when you start asking what the appropriate solution is, that's when difference of opinion starts to show. Benton County Judge Barry Morin said an expansion of his county jail is needed, and the biggest issue stopping that from happening is funding. Benton County receives a smaller portion of the county-wide sales tax now than it did years ago, as the population of cities in the county have grown, and those cities started receiving a bigger part of the revenue. A smaller portion of that tax revenue has meant that more money gained from the tax is going to fund the jail, he said. Seeing as how the allocations of that sale tax revenue is unlikely to change anytime soon, Mooring says Benton County probably needs a dedicated revenue stream to fund the jail, such as what is seen in Washington County.
It's a very tough issue. And the concern is that we're on the precipice of it really getting out of hand, where we will actually have more felons committed, concerning felons, violent felons, than the facility can hold. I think right now, first of all, I think Sheriff Holloway does a great job managing the jail. But at some point, unless the walls get big, expand, there's only so many people that can be put in there. And right now we're overcrowded. We have people sleeping on the floors on these things called boats that are basically these plastic cots. I mean, even right now, we're in an overcrowded situation, and it's almost exclusively felons. And if we don't figure out a way to expand that jail, we're going to end up with even more felons than we can accommodate out there. And I'm very concerned about that. And I don't see, unless there's a shift in how people are sentenced, which frankly, the shift has gone to greater sentences, not less. So unless there's a shift the other way there, or unless there's a dedicated revenue stream to expand that facility, I don't really see a plausible solution to it. And the problem with seeking more funding for a jail is that's a place people don't want to go. You know, our cities have been very successful in passing bond issues for parks and bike trails and streets and curbs and gutters, and for things like sewers and wastewater drainage and things like that, all really important. Those directly affect citizens' lives. Most people don't have direct contact with the jail and don't want to have direct contact with the jail. And that makes it very hard to advocate for additional taxes to expand that. It's a really difficult issue.
For prosecuting attorney Brian Sexton, a combination of things are needed, including a regional state-level facility in Northwest Arkansas.
Honestly, that would help on a lot of different things, including wear and tear on our transport officers, transport vehicles. That would allow us to get people into the system a little quicker and on their way toward a date with the parole board, and start opening up some some space in the county. That being said, the amount of district court issues that we have lead me to believe that there's still going to be the need for some level of jail expansion as well. I know the county has discussed in the past that there is funding for at least some level of construction expansion. The catch-22 is once you get it constructed, you've still got to staff the thing. And I think that'll be the next big challenge, is trying to figure out what we can do to balance those two issues and make sure that, not only are we building something that will be useful to us, but we've got it within our ways and means to ensure that we can staff it, make sure the inmates are made safe, and also be a useful tool to help, reduce this particular delay in getting justice in our district courts, but also hold these folks accountable and make sure our victims are being made whole before the case goes fallow.
Sarah Moore with the Arkansas Justice Reform Coalition says expanding the region's jail facilities is a step in the wrong direction.
Where is this money coming from as we continue to just expand beds? It's an unsustainable, quote unquote, solution. It's tired. I know I'm tired of it. I'm tired of seeing our neighbors ground up by it. It doesn't improve the well-being and outcomes for our local communities and for all Arkansans across the state. And so again, every bit of alternative that we look at that's evidence-based is showing a better return on investment than continuing to burn dollars in this way.
We're going to dig into some of the alternatives to incarceration that have been implemented previously in the area, those that are in use now, and other concepts that haven't been tried yet locally in a future episode of Unpacking the Issue. And we're going to try to unpack the issues surrounding the proposed state prison in Franklin County, and how that might impact local jail overcrowding in an upcoming installment as well. In the meantime, our reporters at the Northwest Arkansas Democrat-Gazette and the River Valley Democrat-Gazette, along with our sister paper, the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette in Little Rock, are going to keep covering the latest developments surrounding jail overcrowding and the state's justice system. You can find that regular coverage online at nwaonline.com and rivervalleydemocratgazette.com, in our print and digital replica edition, and on our app. We'll keep watching and reporting, and we hope you'll keep reading, so we can always help you unpack the issue.